Recently, I've been reading a lot more into Martin Luther King Jr., more than what you're just typically taught in school. And right now I'm on his last book that was the last book that he published. And during his time campaigning and talking to people and learning about the issues that we're facing, I found something interesting that he did. He actually would spend at least 3 days out of the week living in the same environments that the poorest people were living in. Like he would literally go to the poorest cities and the poorest towns, and he would live there for at least 3 out of 7 days. So this kind of gave me the idea of maybe I'm sure this is going to be a really hard challenge for a lot of people, so I don't expect for it to gain much traction. But the idea is a 30-day challenge, and I'm going to do it in 3 different levels. The first level is going to be the level in which Martin Luther King did it, and then there's going to be a 5-day and a 7-day. So in other words, the challenge is going to be a 30-day challenge where you live in poverty for a certain amount of time out of the 30 days. The easy challenge of this would be you live in poverty for 3 out of 7 days out of the week. The moderate version would be 5 days out of 7. And then the hard version, you would be living in poverty for the full 30 days. In order to set this up, I would just like to go over a few guidelines and a few rules as to how you would accomplish this. And doing this kind of challenge might actually give you some insight into what it's like living, without having much. If you're going to the easy mode, let's talk about the easy mode challenge. And some of these rules are going to apply to all of them, but if you're doing easy mode, what you can do is have 3 days and pick these 3 days and stick to those 3 days. They can be back to back or they can be separated throughout the week. It's up to you. The general rules for this would be, 1, you only have a spending limit on food of about $8 per day. If you were to use Google and look up how much poor people typically spend on food, it averages out to about $8 a day. And quite honestly, there are quite a few people that end up spending lower than that, around $5 to $7 a day. But $8 is pretty reasonable. So on these 3 days, the goal is, even if you have food in your refrigerator or anything like that, you need to pretend it doesn't exist. On these 3 days, you have access to no food. You have $8 to spend. You don't have access to a car because people in poverty typically don't really have cars. They usually either carpool, they take the bus, or they find some other means of transportation. So you don't have access to a car. You have about $8 to spend on food. Another rule I would put in there is that since poor people typically don't have much to spend on like other items like clothing, another rule is that you cannot wear any clothing that you have purchased in the last 6 months, which typically if you're in poverty, you only are able to really buy clothes 2 times a year. And actually one of those times of the year is usually a gift. So the other part of the year is maybe your income tax returns. In that case, you'll spend the extra money to buy clothing. Another rule that we're going to make is that on these days, you cannot put the temperature above 67 degrees. As studies have shown, if you put the temperature above 67 degrees, then typically what will end up happening is you'll end up spending about 40 to 50% more on the electric bill. So typically if you're in a situation where you don't have access to a lot of money, you'll keep the temperatures pretty low and you'll kind of sleep a little cold. Also with that, on these 3 days, that means that if anyone invites you out to eat, or if anyone invites you out to go party or do something fun, you have to say, hey, I don't have a car. I actually don't have money to spend going out. And really, the only way I can go is if you pick me up and if you pay for the whole thing. In that case, on those days, if you have a friend that's actually willing to do that for you, then okay, that's fine. You can go ahead and do that on your impoverished days. That would count. However, again, if they're asking you to go out yourself and pay for these things, tell them you don't have the money. If you want to spend your $8 to go out with your friend, you can go ahead and do that. That's fine. Okay, well, that's all I have for the easy mode challenge. Now, if you're going to be doing the 5 to 7 day challenge, there are a couple of things that you would probably do different. Like instead of spending $8 a day on food, you would just budget it to 5 days, $40, or maybe $45 at the most. If you really feel like $40 is kind of pushing it, but 5 days, $45. 7 day challenge, then you'll limit your budget to about $50 to $60 per week, in that range, on food at the most. Typically, I think about $60 is probably more reasonable, and that's usually what the average person that's really poor would probably spend on food. With that said, if you're doing this 5 to 7 day challenge, you would reasonably expect even poor people to set aside a little bit of money in order to go out with their friends and do things here and there. The only thing is you're really limited to the amount of times you can do this. So if you typically go out with a lot of friends, you maybe go with this friend on this day and this other friend on this day, you're going to probably have to limit to just one instance of going out with this one person on this one day, at the most 2 days throughout the whole entire month. That means that you really can only afford a trip yourself no more than twice in the month if you're doing the 5 or 7 day challenge. The reason for this is because, again, poor people will save money even if they can't really afford it. They'll save money just to make sure they can go out with their friends at least a couple times. Otherwise, they'll lose their sanity. Of course, if you're doing these other challenges, the other rules apply. Like, you really would have to make sure that, you're not raising the temperature too much, because again, the electric bill is one of the things that people are concerned about most, especially when they don't have much money, since little changes on the electric bill can make a big difference in their total monthly income. And just a final little thing, on those days that you go out with your friends and you want to have a good time, you have to really keep the limit you spend to $20 and under for yourself. And doing that twice, again, that's going to be about $40 in the month, maybe $50. I think that's reasonable. Even if you're impoverished, you can typically find a way to do that, especially if you want to keep communication with your friends. Now, with that said, if you have access to a car, there are going to be some cases where you need to drive around and you can't avoid that. So if you're doing the 5 to 7 day challenge, I would actually use the car as minimally as possible and only do the mandatory trips you need. And if you end up making extra trips, what you would end up doing is taking that gas money out of the money you have for your friends or the money you have for food. That's basically going to be the trade-off in that case. And of course, for the 5 to 7 day challenge, this rule is also going to be the same, where you're going to only wear clothes that you haven't purchased within the past 6 months. So in other words, you can wear clothes that you purchased maybe half a year ago to a year ago. If you're not really sure when you purchased it, as long as it's worn, you can wear it. Otherwise, if you have a bunch of new clothes in your wardrobe, all of it's off limits for this period of time. You can't wear any of it because that doesn't exist. And of course, for the 5 to 7 day challenger ones, if you really are taking this serious, make sure that you're counting things like coffee as part of your total monthly income for food. Literally, if you're spending like $60 a week per food, you have to minus the coffee, and you don't have to count things like salt. Certain items that you purchase only once every few months, you don't have to count that in this challenge, as that would make it a little too complicated. But just general food items that you need, the major staples of food that you typically use, those are the things that you're going to be having to limit and keep in mind to eat. Like, if you're doing the 5 to 7 day challenge and you really are hungry one day, you can take some of your money from another day and use it in this day to get a little bit more satisfied. Just keep in mind the next day you're probably not going to eat as much. Or if you get to the end of the month, you might run out of your monthly limit. And in that case, you're just going to have to deal with it for the remainder of the time. Okay, anyway, this is my 30-day poverty challenge. 3 different levels, 3, 5, or 7 days. Wait, this is my 30-day poverty challenge. This is the 3, 5, or 7 days, up to you, and the different various rules that you would have to abide by. If you have any questions, or if you have any additional comments that you want to make on this, feel free to comment down below and let me know what you think of this. You can start this challenge anytime you want, and if you go through it, I would urge you to post it as well. Record yourself going through this challenge and the little adjustments that you have to make and the things that you have to do in order to make this adjustment in your life. And at the end of this challenge, let me know how you felt about it, the insights that you might have gained out of it, and let's spread the word. Seriously, I really, even if this video is seen and people listen to this and people decide to do this challenge, I really think that such a small portion of people will actually come out of it successful. And the ones that do are probably the ones that have already been there and done that. Thank you guys for watching. Please don't forget to like this video. Remember, the likes really help the YouTube algorithm spread the word around to other people. And if you share it, this will be the most direct way that other people are going to be watching my videos. Typically, if you share with your friends, they'll be more likely to actually see what you've shared. And of course, subscribe if you haven't yet. I really appreciate everyone watching my content right now. Until next time, don't forget humanity first. How hard is it to be poor?